The Galactic Empire had always been sure of its dominance. For millennia, it expanded across the stars, conquering worlds, crushing civilizations, and absorbing their resources without a second thought. No one dared to resist them. Every new world they encountered fell quickly to their might, their leaders bowing before the Empire's overwhelming power. Then they found Earth. At first, they didn't even see the planet as a threat. A blue-green dot in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, home to an insignificant species that barely made it out of their own atmosphere. Primitive. Weak. Not worth the attention of the Empire's elite forces. But procedure was procedure. Even if the planet posed no threat, it had to be taken. The Warlords, towering creatures bred for conquest, were sent down with their armies. Their fleets darkened the sky. Alien generals in their shimmering armor stood before Earth's leaders, offering terms of surrender. They expected no resistance. The humans refused. The Warlords didn't take the rejection personally. They'd seen it before. Some species just didn't know when they were beaten. It was routine. The orders were simple: wipe out any form of resistance, take control of the planet, and move on to the next. Earth would fall just like every other world. The invasion began with a show of force. The Warlords unleashed their armies, war machines rolling across the land, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Earth's military tried to fight back, but it was a hopeless battle. Their weapons were like toys compared to the Empire's technology. Cities crumbled. Armies were obliterated. But humanity did not surrender. That's when rumors started circulating among the Warlords. Strange stories, whispers of a lone figure appearing on battlefields after entire human armies had been wiped out. One man, standing among the wreckage. Always alone. Always calm. No one believed the stories at first. It was impossible. Earth's armies were shattered. Their leaders were either dead or in hiding. How could one person stand against the might of the Galactic Empire? But the reports kept coming. On a desolate battlefield, after the warlord Phoenix had claimed victory over one of Earth's last remaining strongholds, he saw it for himself. A man walked across the scorched ground, dust swirling around his boots. He didn't wear armor. He didn't carry advanced weaponry. Just an old-fashioned revolver hanging low on his hip. Phoenix laughed. This was the best Earth had left. One man with an ancient firearm? It was insulting. The man didn't speak. He didn't need to. The way he moved, the way he stood, it was like he was waiting for something. As if he wasn't facing an alien warlord, but just another day's work. Phoenix, towering over the human at nearly 8 feet tall, called his soldiers forward. "Crush him," he ordered, bored already. The soldiers rushed in, weapons drawn, eager to end this farce. In a blur of motion, the human drew his revolver. It was faster than anything Phoenix had ever seen. Shots rang out, echoing across the empty battlefield. One by one, Phoenix's soldiers fell, each with a single, perfectly placed shot. The man's hand didn't falter, his movements precise, methodical. Phoenix's amusement turned to confusion. These soldiers were trained to fight the fiercest enemies in the galaxy. Their armor should have been impenetrable. Yet this human had cut them down effortlessly. Phoenix stepped forward, fury building in his chest. He drew his energy sword, its blade humming with deadly power. "You think you can face me, human? I will crush you like the insect you are." The man looked up at him, his eyes cold and steady. He didn't speak. His hand hovered near his revolver, waiting. Phoenix lunged, his sword slicing through the air with lethal precision. The human moved, quick as lightning. A single shot rang out, and Phoenix felt a searing pain in his shoulder. He staggered back, disbelief written across his face. No one had ever wounded him before. No one. The man didn't press the attack. He just stood there, waiting, as if giving Phoenix a chance to reconsider. But the warlord was too proud, too enraged to back down. He charged again, swinging his sword wildly, trying to land a blow. Each time, the human sidestepped, evading the strikes with ease. Another shot rang out, this time hitting Phoenix in the leg. He collapsed to the ground, his sword falling from his hand. The human walked toward him, slow and deliberate. Phoenix struggled to rise, but the pain was too much. He had never been defeated. Not in all his years of conquest. How could this be happening? The man stood over him, revolver in hand, but he didn't fire. Instead, he holstered the weapon and turned away, leaving Phoenix to crawl in the dust. He didn't need to finish him off. The message was clear. The Galactic Empire was not invincible. Earth would not fall so easily. Phoenix watched the man walk into the distance, his mind racing with questions. Who was this human? How could he be so powerful, so precise? There had to be an explanation. But Phoenix didn't have time to ponder. His comms buzzed to life, the voice of his commander barking orders. The Empire would not tolerate failure. Reinforcements were on their way. The Galactic Empire was furious. The defeat of one of their warlords by a lone human was not something they could ignore. It was an insult to their dominance, a blemish on their reputation of unstoppable power. Word spread quickly, and soon, the highest echelons of the Empire were aware of the incident. Phoenix's failure was treated not as an anomaly, but as a threat that needed to be crushed immediately. This wasn't just about one human anymore. It was about maintaining control, about showing the galaxy that no species, no matter how insignificant, could defy them and survive. Orders were sent out, and reinforcements arrived in full force. The Empire dispatched 2 warlords this time, each more ruthless and battle-hardened than Phoenix had ever been. Alongside them, they brought new weapons, powerful machines of war designed to obliterate anything in their path. The humans wouldn't have a chance. The Galactic Empire would ensure that whatever tricks this gunslinger had used would be useless now. The warlords, confident in their strength and technology, arrived on Earth with a singular mission: find and destroy this so-called lone gunslinger. The battlefield was chosen, another desolate ruin, a remnant of Earth's former defenses. The warlords deployed their forces methodically, ensuring there would be no escape, no retreat. Soldiers marched forward in disciplined lines, their armor glinting under the sun, their advanced rifles humming with energy. They spread out, scanning for any sign of the human who had become a symbol of resistance. Drones buzzed overhead, sweeping the area with infrared and thermal sensors. It was only a matter of time before they found him. And then, from the dust and debris, the gunslinger appeared. He walked calmly, as if the hundreds of soldiers surrounding him were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. The same revolver rested at his side, its polished surface reflecting the light. His movements were slow, deliberate, unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. He stopped in the middle of the battlefield, facing the warlords who watched from afar. The warlords, towering beasts of muscle and metal, scoffed at the sight. This was it. This was the human who had defeated Phoenix. They had expected something more, a trick, a weapon, perhaps some hidden army waiting to ambush them. But here he was again, alone, with that same old-fashioned revolver. The first warlord, impatient to prove himself, gestured for his forces to advance. They moved quickly, energy rifles raised, ready to obliterate the lone figure in an instant. But then it happened again. The gunslinger moved faster than any of them could have anticipated. His hand blurred, and in a flash, the revolver was in his grip, firing off shots that echoed like thunder across the wasteland. The soldiers dropped where they stood, each hit with impossible precision. It was over in seconds. The bodies of the Empire's elite soldiers lay scattered around him, lifeless. The warlords watched in stunned silence. One of them, enraged by the sight of his forces falling so quickly, decided to take matters into his own hands. He charged forward, a massive war axe in hand, his armored feet shaking the ground with each step. He roared, the sound reverberating through the air like a beast uncaged, certain that no human could withstand his onslaught. But the gunslinger didn't flinch. He waited unmoving until the warlord was nearly upon him. Then, with the same calm precision, he raised his revolver and fired. The shot hit its mark, striking the warlord in the center of his chest, just beneath the armored plating. The warlord stumbled, his charge faltering as pain surged through his body. He swung wildly with his axe, but the gunslinger sidestepped effortlessly, firing again. This time, the warlord's legs gave out, and he crashed to the ground, gasping for air. The second warlord, realizing the gravity of the situation, ordered a retreat. He wouldn't make the same mistake as the others. Instead of charging in blindly, he called in air support. The Empire's gunships, hovering high above, received the command and descended toward the battlefield. Their cannons roared to life, launching a barrage of plasma rounds toward the gunslinger. For a moment, it seemed like the human would finally meet his end. The firepower raining down on him was overwhelming, more than any individual could hope to survive. But when the dust cleared, the gunslinger was still standing untouched. The warlord stared in disbelief. How could this be possible? The gunslinger didn't give him time to think. In one fluid motion, he holstered his revolver and began moving toward the warlord with the same measured pace. The warlord, now visibly shaken, tried to rally his remaining forces, but it was too late. Panic had spread through the ranks. Soldiers who had once marched with confidence now hesitated, unsure if their weapons could even harm this human. Desperation took hold. The warlord, realizing his forces were breaking apart, activated his personal defense system. A shimmering energy shield enveloped him, a last-ditch effort to protect himself. He sneered at the approaching gunslinger, convinced that this advanced technology would finally put an end to the human threat. But the gunslinger remained unimpressed. He stepped closer, drawing his revolver once more. The warlord braced himself, certain that the shield would hold, that this time the human had overestimated his abilities. But with a single shot, the shield shattered, the bullet piercing through the warlord's skull. The alien's body collapsed in a heap of armor and blood. It was over. The battlefield, once teeming with the Empire's might, was silent. The gunslinger stood alone, as he always did, surveying the aftermath with cold, detached eyes. He hadn't spoken a word throughout the entire confrontation, and now, as the last of the Empire's forces retreated in terror, he turned and walked away. Word of the defeat spread quickly. The Galactic Empire had never faced anything like this before. Their warlords, their soldiers, their technology, it had all failed against one man with a revolver. It wasn't just a defeat. It was a message. Earth wouldn't fall easily. The humans were more than they seemed, and the Empire's arrogance had blinded them to that fact. For the first time, the Galactic Empire began to understand that they were facing something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. And this lone gunslinger, this human anomaly, was just the beginning. The news of the second defeat reached the core of the Galactic Empire faster than anyone could have imagined. The commanders, the politicians, even the Emperor himself, all sat in stunned silence as reports came flooding in. 2 warlords, countless soldiers, and elite weapons had been dispatched to deal with one man, and yet they had all failed. It wasn't just an embarrassment now, it was a crisis. The Empire's reputation, carefully cultivated over millennia, was beginning to crack. In response, the Empire assembled a special council of their most powerful leaders. These weren't just warlords, they were the elite, creatures who had personally conquered entire star systems. Each of them had won dozens of battles, slaughtering species more advanced than humanity without a second thought. These council members had never known defeat, and they found the situation on Earth incomprehensible. A lone human with nothing but a revolver? It defied all logic. But logic didn't matter anymore. The Empire couldn't afford another loss, not after the humiliation of Phoenix and the others. This human had to be eliminated, no matter the cost. They began preparing their most dangerous weapons, summoning fleets from distant galaxies. No expense would be spared. They needed to send a message, not just to the people of Earth, but to the entire galaxy: defy the Galactic Empire, and you will be erased. Leading this new offensive was an alien named Zeros, a warlord whose reputation was built on ruthlessness and efficiency. Zeros had crushed rebellions in systems far more advanced than Earth, and he viewed this situation with nothing but disdain. Humans were an inferior species, a collection of primitives who happened to live on a backwater planet. The idea that one of them could be causing so much trouble irritated him, But he didn't doubt for a second that he would succeed where others had failed. Zeros arrived on Earth, not with an army, but with an overwhelming display of force. Hundreds of ships filled the sky, casting a shadow over the planet. Soldiers, machines, drones, everything the Empire had at its disposal, was prepared for this mission. As the invasion began, Zeros took a different approach from his predecessors. He didn't deploy his troops in waves. He didn't allow his forces to spread out and search for the Gunslinger. Instead, he focused everything on one target, the man himself. This wasn't about conquering Earth anymore. It was about eliminating the single individual who had made the Galactic Empire look weak. Through their advanced tracking systems, Zeros' forces pinpointed the Gunslinger's last known location. His movements, once elusive and unpredictable, seemed strangely deliberate now. It was almost as if he was waiting for them. The alien Warlords' forces descended on him with relentless precision, filling the sky with drones, warships, and soldiers. The Gunslinger would be found, no matter where he hid. When they finally located him, Zeros gave the order without hesitation. The skies above erupted as drones fired volleys of plasma, reducing everything around the man to rubble. Soldiers poured out of dropships, surrounding him on all sides, each one armed with the most advanced weapons in the Empire's arsenal. There was no escape this time. Zeros had seen to that personally. Every corner of the battlefield was locked down, every possible route of retreat blocked. And yet, when the dust settled, the Gunslinger stood unharmed. His revolver gleamed in the fading light, and his eyes, calm as ever, scanned the forces arrayed against him. The soldiers hesitated for just a moment, unnerved by the sight. They had been told he was dangerous, but this? This was something else. Zeros watched from above, his anger growing with every second. He barked orders at his commanders, demanding an explanation. How could one man be standing after the full might of the Empire had been unleashed upon him? How was he still alive? But there was no time for answers. The Gunslinger moved, as he always did, with impossible speed. His revolver flashed, and soldiers fell before they could even raise their weapons. Drones exploded in the air, their circuits fried by shots that seemed impossibly precise. Every move the Gunslinger made was deliberate, every shot a calculated blow to the Empire's forces. It wasn't just skill, it was something more. It was as though the man understood the very mechanics of war itself, exploiting every weakness, every flaw in the Empire's tactics. Zeros, watching the slaughter unfold, decided he had seen enough. He ordered his personal guard to prepare for combat. If this human wouldn't fall to his soldiers, then Zeros would deal with him himself. The warlord descended from his ship, his massive frame clad in armor that had withstood the heat of stars. He wasn't like the others. He wouldn't underestimate this human. The Gunslinger watched as Zeros approached, unflinching as the alien warlord loomed over him. Zeros, towering and powerful, radiated the kind of confidence that came from centuries of victory. He had never lost a battle, and he wasn't about to start now. His weapons hummed with energy, his armor glowing with a power that seemed invincible. But the Gunslinger didn't back down. He simply stood, revolver at his side, waiting. Zeros sneered. "I don't know what kind of trick you've been using, human, but it ends here. You're nothing. You're dust beneath the Empire's feet." The Gunslinger didn't respond. His eyes remained focused, his hands steady. Zeros, enraged by the man's silence, swung his massive energy blade, a weapon that had decimated entire armies. The Gunslinger moved faster than Zeros could have anticipated, dodging the blade and firing off a single shot. The bullet struck Zeros' armor, but instead of bouncing off as it should have, it pierced through, embedding itself deep in the warlord's side. Zeros staggered, disbelief flashing across his face. His armor had never been breached before. Not by anything in the galaxy. But this human, this insignificant creature, had done it with a single shot. The battle raged on. Zeros, injured but still determined, pressed his attack. But no matter what he did, no matter how hard he fought, the Gunslinger remained one step ahead. Each time the warlord thought he had an opening, the man would evade, counter, and strike with deadly accuracy. It was as if the gunslinger knew what Zeros was going to do before he even did it. In the end, Zeros, the warlord who had never known defeat, fell to the ground, his body broken, his armor shattered. He looked up at the gunslinger, confusion and rage in his eyes. What are you?" The gunslinger didn't answer. He simply holstered his revolver and walked away, leaving Zeros to bleed out on the battlefield. The Empire's forces, witnessing the fall of their greatest warlord, began to retreat. The legend of the lone gunslinger had grown, and now, even the Galactic Empire had to admit that Earth was more than they had ever imagined. And the gunslinger? He disappeared once again into the shadows, leaving the Empire to wonder what would come next. The Empire's defeat was more than just a military loss. It was a psychological blow to their very core. The stories of the lone gunslinger spread throughout the galaxy, reaching even the most remote outposts. Fear began to take root. How could an empire that had ruled for so long, undefeated, lose to a single human? It didn't make sense, and the whispers of rebellion started to grow louder. The Empire's leadership knew they had to act quickly before this human became a symbol of defiance for every world under their control. The decision was made. The Supreme Commander of the Empire, a being older than most civilizations, would personally handle this. He had never been called to the front lines before, as his presence alone was said to be enough to maintain order across the galaxy. His strength, intellect, and power were unmatched, and to most, he was more a god than a warlord. He had never been defeated, because he had never needed to fight. No one dared to challenge him. But now, with the Empire on the edge of losing its grip, he had no choice. This gunslinger, this human anomaly, was not just a threat to their dominance, he was a threat to the Empire's very existence. The Supreme Commander would come to Earth himself, and there would be no more mistakes. He arrived without ceremony. There was no need for fleets or legions of soldiers. This was personal. The humans had embarrassed the Galactic Empire, and now, their greatest leader would deliver the ultimate lesson in power. His ship descended upon the ravaged Earth, a single, massive vessel that blotted out the sky, casting the planet into shadow. The gunslinger, as always, seemed to be waiting. Alone, standing on the broken remains of a battlefield, he faced the Supreme Commander without fear. This time, though, there was a sense of finality in the air. The Empire's supreme leader was no ordinary warlord, and the gunslinger seemed to understand that this was going to be different.